What's up, VC? Welcome to another edition of Pete's CD Vinyl World. Today I wanted to do a vinyl tag. This is Noble Records Quarantine Edition, and got this idea from Chris Profree's Musical Obsessed channel. He's got a pretty cool channel. Just actually discovered his channel the other day, so I've been watching some of his videos. So it's 20 questions, and the first one is an album from your state. So I'm from New Jersey, so had to pick a Springsteen album. A lot of artists from New Jersey. I would have probably picked Smithereens maybe, but I don't have any stuff on vinyl from them. But you can't not be a Springsteen fan if you're from New Jersey. So this is one of my favorites from him. An album you would recommend. Again, real quick, I just looked through everything, and this one caught my eye. Jerry Rafferty, City to City. I don't know any of his other stuff except this album, but this album is great from start to finish. Best known for the song Baker Street. Also had another hit on here, Right Down the Line, you'd probably recognize. Sort of the in the middle of the yacht rock craze, but great album nonetheless. Third question, tip for beginners. So I don't know how to answer that really, or what they mean by beginners, but I would say a good tip maybe is to use the MoFi sleeves on all your albums. Most people at least sleeve the outside of theirs, but I would highly recommend these. You know, even on, it took me a while to clean, to sleeve all of my whole collection, but once I had it done, it was worth it. So now I just sleeve the new ones I get, and I just think they look cool in these sleeves too. So that would be my tip. Another tip, maybe, if you plan on buying reissues, maybe do a little research first to see what people are saying about it, what the sound quality is, because most reissues are probably $25 and up, and a lot of times you can probably get a good copy of a album for 10, 15 bucks, depending on how rare it is. Obviously, if it's something obscure or rare and it's coming out, yeah, that might be your only alternative, but I'd maybe do some research first, because a lot of the newer reissues are from a digital source, and some just outright sound like crap from what people say. So that might be another tip. First album that got you into deeper music, and I wouldn't say for me it was an album. It was these guys. Guitar World and Guitar for the Practicing Musician. So back in the 80s, these magazines weren't exclusively focused on rock and hard rock, pretty much like they are now. I would say half of the issues back up until even maybe 1990 or so were covering jazz players, blues players. So that got me intrigued in listening to all these different players. And then, you know, PBS used to show a lot of concerts, so you'd see like Larry Carlton or Pat Metheny or Buddy Guy and be like, oh, I read about that guy. You know, this is pre-YouTube days, obviously, so you couldn't just listen to a guy you wanted to hear what they sounded like. So the best bet would be to read about them, and then maybe take a chance and buy one of their albums. That's probably how I got into Frank Zappa. I'd read about him. Also, when I go to the record stores, I'd, go through every artist from A to Z, and I would see all his album covers, and I would just be like, I have to buy one of his albums. So that's how I got into Frank Zappa, say. So, yeah, I've been playing guitar for, 30 plus years now. So, no kind of music really shocked me, I guess. So certain types I like, certain types I different, but I was always curious about different types of music. Anyway, next question. Obscure record people may not know about. I don't have a huge collection of obscure albums. In my world, an obscure album is probably a band that had an album or two on a major label and they're sort of unheard of. Not that knowledgeable about a lot of the like obscure punk or alternative bands that had one independent album, that type of thing. But I'll just show an album here from a band called The Inmates. They had a few albums out in the late 70s, early 80s. Pretty good. Predate like a lot of the 90s bands like The Strokes, those type of bands. I think this one came out in 79. I've only listened to it a couple times, but it was pretty good. You know, I don't know what's considered obscure. They're obscure to the probably average music fan if they've never heard of them. So that was my pick. Group of artists that you collect all the albums of. So I probably all the bands I like. I would want to get the whole catalog at some point. There's very few that I have all the albums of. 3 of the bands right off the bat, Van Halen, Cheap Trick, and Kiss. I have everything on CD, and I'm slowly collecting all their records. So, yeah, but I would have to say that a lot of bands I have a mixture of CDs and vinyl of their catalog. So, you know, as I go on and collect records, I pretty much try to get everything if I can find it at a reasonable price. A band whose second album is better than the first. Probably a lot of bands out there whose second album is better than the first. And there's probably a lot of bands whose first album are better than the second album. There's a lot of sophomore slumps out there. But right off the bat, one that came to mind was Judas Priest's Sad Wings of Destiny. Not that their first album wasn't good, but it's more of a basic bluesier type hard rock. This is where they sort of started playing the more metallic twin guitar leads. So this is still considered one of their best albums as well. So that's why I chose that one. Whack-a-mole. So let me go pick one out. I'm not going to turn my camera around, but I will just grab something. So, this is what I grabbed. Hall & Oates, better than the both of us. I like Hall & Oates a lot. Especially, I would say their late 70s, early 80s period the most. I'm actually not that crazy about the whole white Philly soul thing they do, but you know, their late 70s, early 80s albums were almost, they're very pop, but there was a lot of stuff in there that was almost new wave-ish, and that's pretty much the stuff I like the best. This one's pretty good. Sounds great, that's for sure. This is sort of right before that era I was just talking about. But, yeah, I've always liked Hall & Oates. Album you listen to the most? First thing that came to mind was my first album I ever had, Kiss Destroyer. When I was 5, my cousin gave me a cassette copy of this, and I listened to that every day for probably years. It's probably the only album I had for years. So, ironically, it was actually the first CD I ever got. I think I got a CD player in 1986, and Destroyer was one of the first ones I got. So, it's could be other ones, but I would say that's probably right up there. Album with a crazy story. This one I had trouble with. Probably brings me more to my hanging out with my friends in the 90s. We were all cruising around. So this sort of rings a bell, the Black Album from Metallica. One particular story I remember, I was a senior in high school, or maybe I was just out of high school when this came out. No, this came out while I was in high school. So my first car was an 84 Camaro with T-tops, typical in those days. So I remember one particular story where my brother and his good friend at the time, but later became a good friend of mine as well. We went down to another friend's shore house down the Jersey Shore. So it must have been right after school ended, so like probably the middle of June, where it still gets a little cool at night, especially at the Jersey Shore. So we had trouble finding this guy's shore house for whatever reason. You know, there was no GPS back then. You know, it took us like it probably took us 2 hours, and it should have took us like an hour to get there. Anyway, so the night ends and we head home. We take the T-tops off. Our friends in the back, we're blasting this album, cruising, you know, wherever, up Route 9 or the Parkway or whatever, and didn't realize that he was like, you know, freezing his ass off back there. He had like a blanket on him, shivering. I didn't know him that well. He didn't want to like say anything to me, I guess. But by the time we got home, it looked like there was icicles hanging out of his nose. So that's just one funny story I remember particular about this album. But luckily we didn't get lost getting home, so he would have been really frozen. Collecting pet peeves. Again, I didn't know how to take this one. Let's see. One pet peeve I have that I guess is people thinking their records are like worth more than maybe they really are. I see a lot of the Facebook ads where people are selling records, and a lot of the records they're selling for like $20 each are really like, in actuality, maybe $5 records, $10 records at most. In fact, and probably most of them, there's a great store in New Jersey called the Princeton Record Exchange. They have like these legendary dollar bins where pretty much every record in there is automatically worth between $5 and $10. So that's probably a pet peeve of mine. Let me think. I would say the whole reissue thing. I'm not big on reissues in general. If it's something, you know, that's never come out before on vinyl, like a special record store day, like a live concert, something that's cool. But in general, I'm not big on that stuff. I don't collect records for the collectability factor. I collect records because I want to listen to them. So, yeah, I won't buy an album, another pressing of an album, just because it has some kind of printing error or something that doesn't affect the music. Although if it's cheap enough, yeah, why not? If it's one of my favorite artists. But, I guess that's a pet peeve. I mean, I think your record collection is probably worth more to you than anyone, even though some of those records in your collection might be only $5 records, you know. Genre that you might be surprised I like. I had a tough one like with this one also, because I pretty much like something from every genre of music, I would say. I don't like probably modern pop, this crap that's out now that's on the radio, and that goes along with the modern sort of R&B stuff that's out now, which is crossed over into pop. Who knows what's what now? It's just all garbage. But I do, pretty big fan of English pop, everything from early 80s stuff through Oasis, and even someone like Lily Allen. Like her a lot. So I fan of English pop a lot. I think they have a better sense of humor than Americans. They are, I don't know, they're quirky. And I've just always liked English pop, even since the early days of MTV, where they show a lot of those English bands. Record from the year you were born. Actually, this one I had a little bit of trouble with, because I thought there was more albums that I had released in 1974 that I realized later they were either 73 or 75, but one I just picked real quick was Yes Relayer. May not be my favorite one from that year, but it's just one that I picked. Interesting fact about an album or a song. There's a ton I could have. One of the first ones that came to mind is Van Halen 1984. Not sure if it's well known, but Michael McDonald actually has a co-writing credit on I'll Wait. And it's not on the album, even here. All songs written by Edward Van Halen, Alex Van Halen, Michael Anthony, and David Lee Roth. It's on the publishing, but for whatever reason, I guess he agreed not to have it on the album when it came out. I'm not sure what part he wrote. I would imagine Eddie wrote the keyboard part to that, but I did read about a meeting that David Lee Roth had with Michael McDonald with writing something with them. So I'm not sure how obscure a fact that is, but I always thought it was interesting. Album with animals on the cover. Again, just grabbed the first one I saw. Tigers of Pantang, Spellbound. Early 80s new wave of British heavy metal album. John Sykes plays on this, who later went on to Thin Lizzy and, of course, the 87 Whitesnake album. This one came out in 81, so this is pre-Thin Lizzy. Pretty good metal. Crazy artwork. Again, I just went through... Oh, I skipped the 10-inch records one. I don't have any 10-inch records. In fact, I see a lot of people show them, but they seem to be more of a punk thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, if you could explain what they are, I'd appreciate it. I'm assuming they have like 4 songs, 2 on each side, maybe. Are they 33 or are they 45s? I'm not sure, but from what I see, it seems to be more of a punk thing or a record store day thing, collectible thing. So, yeah, I don't have any 10-inch records. Crazy artwork. So I just grabbed this one. Fabulous Thunderbirds, Tough Enough. Stevie Ray Vaughan's brother, Jimmy Vaughan, plays in this band. Had a couple of big hits off here, Tough Enough and Wrap It Up. Album with an acquired taste. I picked this one, Alan Holdsworth, Road Games. So I listened to not a whole lot of instrumental stuff, but enough where I guess non-musicians would be like, what is this crap? Yeah, Alan Holdsworth is one of the premier or first shredders really out there. He influenced everyone from Eddie Van Halen to Steve Vai. His music overall is probably sort of in the jazz fusion genre, I would say. Not all instrumental. He does have some vocals on his albums. It can be, the solos on his songs can be a little redundant after a while. They all just sound like a blur. But still mind-blowing nonetheless. Another band that I don't want to say was an acquired taste, but it was a band that I took a while to appreciate was probably Steely Dan. I had always known their hits and liked them, but I wouldn't even say casual fan. I didn't even own any of their CDs or records. But about 10 years ago, a friend of mine who's also into vinyl started playing a lot of their albums on vinyl, and you get to appreciate how good they are when you hear them on vinyl. So I'm a big fan of theirs now. So yeah, they're a band that you hear them on the radio. It's definitely not the same as hearing it on vinyl or maybe even CDs. A lot of music is like that. You know, you hear it on the radio and it just sort of passes over you. But if you really hear it on CD or vinyl, really, you really get into it more, I think. And most recent finds, obviously, the last month and a half, I haven't been to any record stores or thrift stores. Let me see. I'll just grab a couple here that I've picked up. Probably the last ones I picked up. Cheap Trick, Richard Marx. This is a white label promo of this album. There was one of these I missed, I think. I don't know. I think it was a record that you got. Oh, really good album for cheap. That's the one I forgot. So, I don't know if that was one specific album that I found for cheap or just records you can get cheap in general. I'm just trying to think. I got a couple of Deep Purple UK pressings for 50 cents each at a yard sale. That was a pretty good find. But in general, at all the thrift stores, you could pretty much find the 50s stuff like Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Nat King Cole, that stuff, sometimes even in mono. And some of them are like in mint condition. So those are always a good find for $1. And, unfortunately, they're not just worth... The market for those, I guess, has gone away. Now the market's moved now towards early rock and roll, 60s, psych, 70s rock and roll and metal. So yeah, even though those albums are older, they may not be worth as much. So anyway, if you want to do one of these, cool. If you like these videos, please subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.